All hope is lost. That's the phrase ricocheting through trench phones and shaky voice notes from the Sumy direction. In a small grid square that most maps don't bother to name, Russian troops in and around Unokhivka are learning what a modern fire pocket really means. Not a ring of tanks and a banner assault. An invisible vice. Roads you can't drive, paths you can't walk, trains that never arrive, an air that hums with quadcopters you can't see until they drop steel in your lap. Ukraine didn't storm the village. It tightened the tap. It turned supply into bait, movement into risk, and time into a weapon. And the message those soldiers are sending back to their commanders is simple and bleak. We are hungry, we are isolated, and nobody is coming. Through the summer, Russian forces probed into Sumy Oblast to carve a buffer, trading speed for presence. Push a platoon here, seed a trench there, extend artillery umbrella just enough to bruise Ukrainian border towns. Ukraine's answer was the opposite of momentum, denial. Instead of contesting every hedgerow head-on, Ukrainian units mapped the lifelines feeding the pocket, secondary roads, forest tracks, bridges, and rail nodes, and put them under intermittent, unpredictable fire control. Not a wall, but a metronome. You can get in once. You may not get out. Repeat that routine for days, and then weeks, and you don't need to plant a flag. You plant doubt. Fire pockets aren't just guns pointed at exits. They're networks. Tablets pushing target tracks from cheap sensors. Thermal drones loitering in tree lines. Artillery on hair-trigger missions measured in minutes, not hours. When a convoy idles too long near a tree line, it's flagged. When a foot patrol crosses a field, a drone shadows. And if a squad tries to exfiltrate at dusk, a cluster of FPVs starts their engines like wasps leaving a nest. Bridges that matter to trucks get cut. Footbridges that matter to men are mapped and ranged. Railheads that promise ammunition become places where promises go to die. The effect is cumulative. Food gets late, batteries run low, medical kits empty, and commanders write orders that can't beat physics. Ukraine calls it fire control for a reason. You don't have to hold a road to own it. You just have to make every attempt to use it a dice roll. Reports from the sector describe Russian attempts to rotate units in Unokhivka failing not because the front is lined with concrete, but because the hinterland is salted with ice. You can feel the ground closing without seeing a single assault column. And when panic rises, when two soldiers step out with hands high and are strafed by their own drones, the lesson burns in deep. The village is a cage, and even surrender is hazardous. Unokhivka's layout punishes the side that needs to move. Scattered, burned-out structures leave little cover. Fields invite observation. Woodlets are narrow and already ranged. If you're Ukraine, storming that kind of grid is a tax you don't need to pay. If you're Russia, defending it after the arteries are cut means you're guarding your own hunger. The kill mechanism here isn't a Hollywood encirclement. It's a doctrine collision. On one side, a Ukrainian approach built on latency and leverage. Make the other crew choose between disobeying orders and starvation. On the other, a Russian chain of command conditioned to treat ground as identity. We do not surrender what we took is not a battlefield plan. It's an addiction. And addictions burn through men. When commanders won't authorize withdrawal and the supply picture keeps darkening, junior leaders improvise, lie, or break. That's how pockets stop being tactical and start being moral. People talk about morale as vibes. In kill pockets, morale is logistics. The willingness to run a quadcopter again at midnight because you know it might keep an ambulance empty tomorrow. The decision to stay in a trench because you trust relief will come by morning, or to walk into the open because you don't. The voice notes from inside the pocket, complaints of no rotation, no food, no batteries, no medevac, aren't just sad stories. They're an operations brief. Units that can't rotate become units that can't patrol. Units that can't patrol become units that can't hold. The drone multiplier. Here's the unglamorous truth of 2025. Cheap drones turn every pocket into a sifter. In past wars, a commander might gamble a night breakout under rain and luck. Today, even a four-man element creeping a hedgerow can be tracked, nudged, or punished by systems that fit in a hatchback. By late 2024 into 2025, credible open-source estimates put FPV output in the hundreds of thousands per month across both sides, with Ukraine and Russia racing to automate detection, routing, and strikes. That scale lets Ukraine turn open ground into a schedule of hazards. No single barricade, just a standing appointment with contact. If your doctrine assumes that initiative belongs to the side that moves fastest, these pockets rewrite that math. The initiative belongs to the side that makes movement expensive. Ukraine doesn't need Unokhivka back tomorrow. It needs the Russians inside to stop being a threat to places that matter. By sealing a pocket and refusing the frontal fight, Ukraine frees up the very assets, artillery tubes, drone teams, EW vans, that might be decisive elsewhere in Sumy. The pocket becomes a passive income stream of enemy degradation. Every day that the village remains held, but non-functional, is a day Ukraine banks pressure across the line. The larger message is corrosive. If Moscow can't feed and rotate a tiny grip of ground near its own border, how does it sustain broader offensives? Russian leadership can shrug off individual losses, but patterns chew through narrative. When families hear that a son didn't die taking ground, but starving on ground already taken, the propaganda calculus changes. It's one thing to sell sacrifice for victory. It's another to sell sacrifice for a map square that exists only to bleed. Numbers in this war are politicized, so treat them with care. But even cautious tallies show a grim ratio on the Russian side. Unusually high killed to wounded in periods of intense assaults, consistent with weak casualty evacuation and poor point of injury care reported by multiple monitors. That ratio becomes catastrophic in pockets. If you can't move a wounded man without drawing fire, he isn't a wounded man for long. And if your medics lack kits or training, the battlefield becomes a filter that rewards the side with more tourniquets than slogans. Ukraine's fire pocket practice is a design pattern that other defenders will copy. Identify lifelines, put them on a timer, let the adversary talk himself out of retreat. It's asymmetric without being mystical, more about calendars and cables than sci-fi weapons. Russia's doctrine, by contrast, is showing its seams. Insist on holding, punish talk of withdrawal, broadcast that territory equals truth. In a networked battle space, that's a plan to marinate your own troops in risk until something gives. From can we hold to can we eat? The turning point in Unokhivka wasn't as storming. It was when the last reliable resupply window closed. A bridge bite here, a rail delay there, a night route that used to be mostly safe, becoming mostly watched. Somewhere in that slide, Russian platoon leaders stopped asking how to expand a salient and started asking how to split rations. That's when a pocket matures, when defense becomes housekeeping under pressure and housekeeping fails. War crimes allegations have shadowed this conflict on both sides, and they demand evidence and process. With that caveat, if units inside the pocket truly face punishment from their own drones when attempting to surrender, as some clips claim, that's not just cruel. It's strategically illiterate. You cannot shoot your way out of a reputation for abandoning men, and you can't keep men in a fight by telling them their options are starvation or friendly shrapnel. The rational Ukrainian next step is the least cinematic. Keep the tap closed, keep the artillery honest, and keep the drone lattice fresh. Fortify the woods and the seam lines south of the road net. Lock down approaches to adjacent hamlets like Yablonivka. Treat every gap as temporary and every Russian attempt to widen it as a chance to trade cheap munitions for expensive morale. The goal isn't banners, it's bandwidth, freeing maneuver brigades to work sectors where mobility still yields positional gain. Moscow's commanders have three, none good. Push a relief corridor, which requires mass and timing, and arrives under a sky thick with small eyes. Order a breakout, which risks turning a slow loss into a fast one as units cross open ground already ranged. Or write the pocket off quietly, rebranding starvation as holding under pressure, hoping the news cycle moves on. Each route spends something Moscow is short on: trained leaders, medals, or truth. As temperatures fall, this pocket fight becomes a battery fight, literal battery chemistry. Drone endurance drops in the cold, operators' fingers slow, optics fog. Ukraine will try to offset with better cells, heated storage, and tighter handoff discipline. Russia will try more night moves and smoke screens, maybe heavier EW blankets to blind the small stuff. But winter bites logistics first. If your pocket is already hungry in October, it won't be heroic in January. Sumy isn't just a border nuisance. It's a test bed for the next year of this war. Fire pockets here inform tactics in Kharkiv's countryside or the Donbass tree belts. If Ukraine proves it can freeze Russian footholds without spending infantry lives, it shifts incentives across the map. If Russia proves it can reopen one pocket with a combined arms relief attack, it shows it can still synchronize beyond attrition. That's why Unokhivka matters beyond its name. It's a small place with a big argument inside it about what 2025's fighting will reward. There's a final cost that doesn't show up on loss exchanges. You can order a battalion to hold. You cannot order a mother to forget a voicemail where her son whispers that hunger hurts more than shrapnel. Armies are machines made of people, and reputations are armor you can't issue from a depot. Every soldier left to starve in a pocket is a hole in that armor. Sooner or later, the bill comes due, not in headlines, but in hesitation at the next assault line. Ukraine's method is patience with teeth. The Unokhivka pocket isn't an accident, it's an instrument. It plays on Russia's worst reflex: hold everything, admit nothing, and forces commanders to choose between ground and men. It trades cheap drones and time for expensive enemy despair. It frees Ukrainian combat power for sectors that pay. And it sends a message down the Russian chain that echoes louder than any speech. If you step into a box we built, we will close the lid and wait. Russia's problem is design, not just losses. You can replenish bodies. You can't replenish trust at the same speed. A military that treats evacuation as optional and rotation as a luxury will eventually discover that initiative is also a luxury. In pockets, that discovery happens fast. The longer Unokhivka sits as a win on paper and a slow bleed in reality, the more honest officers will quietly plan for the next pocket by packing extra food, and the more cynical ones will plan to say nothing when the next radio goes dark. If Moscow wants to avoid more Unokhivkas, the fix isn't louder patriotic messaging. It's logistics discipline, casualty evacuation that works under fire, and commanders empowered to trade ground for soldiers when the math stops lying. If those changes sound unlikely, that's the point. Cultures don't pivot in a week. Pockets don't forgive. Watch for reclaimed tracks in the forest south of the road net. Watch for systematic Ukrainian strikes on trains feeding the sector, not just dramatic hits, but boring scheduling misses. Watch for Russian propaganda suddenly rediscovering the tactical withdrawal lexicon. And watch the weather. When the first real freeze holds, listen for batteries. How many flights per day? How long in the air? That's the pocket's pulse. Maps seduce us into thinking war is about color. Unokhivka reminds us it's about calories, circuits, and time. Ukraine is running a clock. Russia is running out of meals. That is not a story with a grand finale. It's a story with a quiet end, a road that nobody uses anymore, a house that nobody fights over, a pocket that one day is just empty. If you want defense explained without the fluff, how patience, logistics, and small drones can beat swagger, this is your channel. Subscribe, ring the bell, and share this with someone who still thinks hold at all costs is a strategy. We'll keep cutting through the noise so you see how the war is really decided. One supply line, one battery, one decision at a time.